Hi, Clutter Fairy fans. Welcome to the Clutter Fairy Weekly for January 28th, 2020. I'm your co-host, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas.
Hi, guys. This is the Clutter Fairy Weekly webcast and podcast where we offer organizing strategies and tips, and we're going to answer your questions and tackle the topic suggestions that you so graciously have been giving us in the comment sections on Facebook and on YouTube. We really appreciate that, so thank you.
Hold on. Did you say podcast?
Yes, we did. That's the exciting announcement that he teased earlier in the week. We realized that a lot of the fans on YouTube were listening to the content. We were talking about that earlier, listening to the content while they were working. And we had some requests for the audio files, being able to listen to the audio files as a download. And we had put a few of those out on our website, the audio version only. And so this week we decided to take it a step further, and we launched the Clutter Fairy Weekly webcast as a podcast as well.
That's right. Anybody who likes to listen to podcasts can now subscribe to our show on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and through several other podcast directories. Right now, you can find all the episodes since we switched to the weekly format in December, but we're also planning to publish our back issues as bonus content on the podcast feed. Visit cfhou.com/podcast to see a list of episodes, to listen online, or to find links to all the ways that you can listen to the show on your smartphone, tablet, watch, or other device.
So it'll just be a regular audio file. We want to extend a big Clutter Fairy welcome to anybody who's joining us for the first time by way of the podcast version of our show, which will be published a little bit later. We're happy you're joining us, and we'd love to hear from you. So feel free to drop us a line at podcast@clutterfairyhouston.com so we'll know where your commentary came from. Thank you so much.
Okay, a couple of quick notes for anybody joining us for the first time. If you're participating in the Zoom meeting, please feel free to share your comments and questions via the chat, and I'll try to make sure Gayle gets to them before we move on to a different topic. We're streaming the webcast live on Facebook, so you can also share your questions and suggestions in the comment there, and I'll relay them to Gayle. During the live webcast, you can also talk to us directly by calling 669-900-6833. Use meeting ID 993-419-863 to join the meeting. Those are the numbers at the top right of your screen. Okay, Gayle, let's get to our topics.
So last week we talked about the white elephant table at the bead retreat and how this is a great way to give away things to groups that you interact with. And we got this comment from our viewer CM, who offered a wonderful, her personal take on a white elephant table that she uses in her home. And here's what her comment was. Love your white elephant table idea. I have a white elephant trunk inside near my front door. So when friends and family visit, I invite them to take whatever they like from the trunk when they leave. Since the trunk is a lovely wood and the lid is usually closed, the area always looks clean and neat. But children especially love digging through the treasure chest of a trunk and to find some treasure to take home to surprise their mother. So their mom may not be happy, but I thought it was a lovely idea to, if you have a steady stream of guests coming in and out of the house, what a great idea to have a trunk by the front door with things that are like, okay, I'm done with this. Does anybody want it? I thought that was a great adaptation of the white elephant idea. You always want to look for ways to give away stuff in bulk, and free to a good home works at the curb. If you have a neighborhood that doesn't get too twitchy about it. I used to do this in another neighborhood. I don't live in such a busy street now, and my previous home, I lived on sort of the main thoroughfare through the subdivision, and so I could put things at the end of my curb and they'd be gone in 20 minutes. Like, people would just drive by and somebody would pluck it up and disappear. And then once they figured out I was doing that regularly, people made special trips by the house to find out what I'd put out today. So if you live in a neighborhood where you can put something out for a half an hour and not get in trouble, you will find that a lot of things will disappear. They will go on the river of stuff. Somebody will take them away just if you go to the end of the curb. If you do the white elephant table where you go to somebody's house, somebody's event, you're going to a meeting that you normally go to, you're going to your church or whatever. I just wanted to add the little caveats that you always want to make sure that you clean up behind yourself, because you don't want the person that's allowing you to set up the white table to be irritated with you because you left a bunch of stuff behind. So part of your rehoming these is that if nobody takes it away, you have to take it back and send it off to donation. And if you get to do this as a regular thing where you're going to put the table up and take it down every time you go to the meeting, then if something hasn't been grabbed after 2 or 3 meetings, then you need to call it done and take it off to donations, specifically, send it off to Goodwill or whatever. So, give people a couple of tries at it and then let it move on. And thank you so much for the comment. And however you create your interaction with the public to Whiteelephant your stuff, it's a great way to say, I'm done with it and I'm happy to gift my largesse to you and let it go on to benefit somebody else immediately, hopefully. Thank you.
We've been doing kind of an expanded version of that, the Whiteelephant trunk idea, in our apartment as we're getting ready for our move, which is in about 2 weeks.
I know, right?
Which is to move everything that we're not planning to take with us into the living room. And then as we had some people over for brunch on Saturday, and we're going to do it again with a different group next Saturday, and sort of announcing to them that anything they see, they should feel free to ask for it and haul it off.
Well, and I did see an article, somebody posted that to the Facebook page, where in anticipation of downsizing their home, they had a big giveaway party at their house. And so this couple pulled everything out that they didn't want, and they basically invited all of their friends and had an open house, and everybody that came in the house had to go out with something. And so they had a big stream of visitors, and here's all the stuff, and take what you want. And so they sort of let their friends be the army of people that relocated the stuff. And I thought that was a really clever idea.
Yeah. Okay, before we get on to our main topic of today, I wanted to remind viewers and listeners that we have more than 100 videos on a wide variety of organizing topics on our YouTube channel at cfhou.com/YouTube.
Ooh, wait.
Subscribe on YouTube. You can subscribe on YouTube to receive notifications whenever we post something new.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're on to the next topic, which is downsizing. We thought that we would do an episode talking about downsizing because we received some inspiration from some of our viewers. Hippobalita, and my apologies if I didn't say that correctly, in Zurich, Switzerland says, I've given myself a funny challenge to kick out 3 things every day to hit the 1,000 mark by the end of the year. What a great aspiration. I'm going to get rid of 1,000 things by the end of the year. I've done this in the past where I would set 100 things per month and ended up with more than 1,000 things gone. But now our household's slowly approaching normal size again. It's of course a bigger challenge. And then Bonnie says, I would like to see more episodes about downsizing. There's a big difference between decluttering to stay in place and decluttering to move from a house or home to an apartment or a condo. And yes, you are correct. So this is a really big topic that we touched on as we were discussing clutter and aging. Everybody at some point in their life is going to downsize from a larger house to a smaller house. And there's a million reasons why that might be. But if you are moving in with somebody, you might be going from the same size house to the same size house, but now instead of one of you in the house, there's 2 of you. So effectively you're downsizing because you're surrendering half the house to a second person. So it can even be about moving in, or it can be about going from a larger space to a smaller space. As a downsizing process, I think you have to remember that you need to have plenty of time to work on it, because downsizing is all about taking what fits in a larger space and thinning that herd out so that you can fit into a smaller space. And if you are trying to do that in a big hurry, you're going to take way more than you need. So make sure you have plenty of time, as much as you can, so that you can go through the process of pulling out a contents in the kitchen or in the bathroom or wherever and sorting through the stuff and thinning that herd and down to what is going to go to the new house. You want to see the downsizing process as, particularly if you've been into your current space for a long time, you have to remember that you've been slowly putting things away in all of the closets and the bathroom and the storage container and all of the little nooks and crannies in your house. You've been stashing things away for a long time. And so you didn't accomplish that in a week. You've accomplished it in the 30 years you've lived there. So you have to be careful that when you start pulling all that stuff out, you have enough time to go, I have to deconstruct 30 years and make fresh decisions. Some of the things that you pull out, you will have forgotten that they were there. And so you'll be surprised by the stuff you find, and it'll be like, oh, I stuck that away 10 years ago thinking I would use that, and I never have. And so you're going to, in the process of downsizing, you're going to touch everything because you're moving, first of all, and then you're going to find all this stuff that you've forgotten about, second of all. And so it's the perfect time to reevaluate with a fresh eye, with a current eye, this stuff, does this item that I'm holding in my hand right now, does this thing have a purpose in my current life? Does it support the things that I am doing right now? Is it something that I can see myself using in the new space immediately? Is it a duplicate of something that I already have? So the kitchen example of this is you have 4 different ways to toast bread, because you have a toaster and you have a little broiler oven and you have the actual oven. So there's always a way to do something more than one way in the kitchen, and you probably have tools to support all the different ways because over time you have tried a whole bunch of stuff. So as you're making those choices and evaluating what is going to go into the new house, you want to say, do I have something that will serve this function already that also does a few other things, and I can let this one extra toaster go because I have a broiler oven and I'm happy to do that in the broiler oven as well. Bad example, but you get the idea. You want to make sure that you don't have, as you downsize, you don't want to take multiple ways to do the same thing. So evaluate everything that you touch. Does it support your current life? Can you make this happen some other way? Is this the best way? And there's all kinds of opportunities for you to edit collections. So one of them is books. We all love our books, right? But you want to be able to thin that content down. This is the time. And if you're downsizing, trying to find a wall to put a bunch of bookshelves on to save a bunch of books is going to be harder. So if you can thin that collection, that would be great. And using it, we've talked about algorithms on the show before. If you can use an algorithm, just set some basic parameters about how to thin the books. Like, I'm going to look at all the books that I've actually read, and I think I won't read again. So go along all the books and say, if I read it, then and I'm not going to read it again, then it can go. So if you haven't read it, that's in the keep pile. And if you had read it, then you got to evaluate again. Am I going to read it again? And if the answer is no, then it's one of the ones that can be left. You can subtract books that you think are in bad condition. You can subtract things that you've lost interest in. Sometimes in your book loving frenzy at the secondhand bookstore, you end up buying 10 books that day, and 7 of them you've actually gone back to, and 3 of them were like, okay, I had a moment of brain fart right there and I bought a book and I'm not really interested in following up on that. Or I've read other books about this topic and I don't want to read another one. And so there's probably some books in there that you bought in the moment. It's just like buying clothes that, you think it's going to be a good idea and you change your mind later. So there's a book version of that. And there's also sometimes people give you books. Like, here's a book that they think you're going to love, and maybe it missed the mark. Maybe it's not really as exciting to you as you think it's going to be. So, or as they think it's going to be. So those are the kind of algorithms: gifts that didn't work, books that are in bad condition, books that I've read before and don't want to read again. And that's a way to thin the herd. You're just setting yourself some parameters, and you can do that around all kinds of things in the house. Clothes is a perfect one. And then maybe the algorithm around the clothes is, okay, if I'm going to have half the closet in the new space that I have in my current space, then maybe I need to get rid of a bunch of clothes. So now, so while currently you can store clothes that don't fit 2 sizes each direction because you have plenty of room, when you go into a smaller space, guess what? You're going to have to shrink that population, and now's the time to say, can't keep all those clothes, got to get rid of some of the ones that don't fit. So it's a perfect time to thin those down. Downsizing becomes this process of evaluating all of your contents against your current lifestyle, because our house is sort of our repository of all of the things that you've experienced over your life for however long that you live there, and the backwash of objects that accumulate because you've interacted with them at some point in your life while you were in the house, and then they just sort of get parked there. And if you haven't been good about redonating things on a regular basis, then you will find a point in time, and downsizing is one of those points. Moving makes you look and touch everything, right? So when you get to that point, you're going to be going, oh, I forgot that. Oh, look what we shoved in this closet. And you're going to pull out all this stuff, and you're going to have to make a whole bunch of decisions about, does this really make a difference to my life now or not? And is it worth surrendering space in my new, smaller space to take it with me? And so the judgment is going to be really harsh. Another collection about that you can purge is electronics. We all accumulate 4 million cables. It's a big joke that everybody has a bucket somewhere, a box, a bin that's full of all these cables that we think we're going to need someday, right? Except every electronic that you buy comes with a whole new round of cables, right? Like nobody's selling electronics without the cable that goes with it. So purging all of the old electronics and the old cables and taking them to recycling is a good thing. You don't want to drag the box of cables with you. And you also want to keep, here's all the newest tech that I have that I'm actually using, and it's time to surrender the old versions and let them go. Don't move those, the old iPod and the old VCR and the, there's all those things that have plugs that you've been stashed in the corner because at the time you couldn't bear letting go of them. But when you downsize, this is the time to let that old tech go out of your life. And if it's, if part of the reason that you don't let go of the tech is because anybody that's my age or older remembers a time when tech did not dominate our life. We remember when none of these devices existed, and we went through the sort of introductory period where it was like, oh my God, it's a computer and it has our life on it. And so we don't trust them in the same way that people that grew up with it as part of their life, they don't think about it, but we do. And so if part of the reason that you don't want to surrender the tech is because you feel like it's got all this data on it that isn't safe and whatever, then, it's time to get out the hammer and start whacking things, right? Like if all you could do is to feel comfortable is to whack the crap out of it until it can't be used again, then whatever works, right? If you destroy it, if you run over it with the car, if you whack it with a hammer so that it cannot be recovered, you take the SD card out and you whack that with a hammer, and whatever you have to do to feel safe about it so that you can donate it. And what they really want to do when they recycle is they reclaim all those precious metals. They recycle the plastic and the other metals internally. And so if what's holding you up is the idea that somewhere in the ghost of the machine is all of your data that's going to be compromised, then figure out a way to make yourself comfortable. And usually that way is destruction. So find somebody who can destroy it, and then you can donate it broken, and they're going to get into it and pull out all the stuff that's important. Okay, that's tech. Clothing and kitchen, all of those things you can create algorithms around it. I said clothing, and thinking about that as a downsizing, thinning for different sizes, thinning for the shoes that don't fit anymore, thinning for the stuff that Yeah, everybody tells me the story like they have the pair of shoes that they've been holding up there for years and they hadn't looked at them in a while, and they pull them down and they try to put them on and they fall apart on their foot because some material in the shoe has deteriorated in place. So there's always things as you will go and touch them that'll be easy to let go of, and you just want to give yourself enough time to go through and make those decisions. I will say the biggest place where people fail is people who have hobbies. If you are a sewer, a quilter, a knitter, whatever, and you have all those hobby supplies, I know you're in love with those supplies. And the biggest problem that I see, and a lot of the calls that I get after people downsize is, oh my God, I crammed my hobby into this new bedroom space and I can't figure out how to set the room up, because they couldn't bring themselves to let go of some of the material on the front end, and then they are drowning because they can't crowbar it all into the new space. And so be ruthless about your hobbies, let go of stuff that you're not going to use, and let go of things that other people can use now. And if you have to replace a few things later, better to err on the side of caution so that you can actually use your hobby room in the new space instead of not. Okay.
Gayle, I'm going to interrupt you
Okay.
with a couple of comments before we get any further. And we're going to go to first Denise in France. Denise, go ahead.
Hi, Denise.
Hi. I put up a little message and Edward seemed to think I should say it publicly.
Thank you for trying. Thank you so much.
Well, when I retired a few years ago, I decided to move from my apartment in town and to live full-time in the house in the country.
Okay.
The house in the country was obviously full. So I had to move an apartment, a 4-room apartment, plus cellar, plus garage, into a house that was already full. So I picked out the books that I really wanted to keep, and then I invited my friends on different days and said, help yourself, take whatever you want. And they were delighted, and they helped themselves. And one of the neighbors kept turning to her husband and saying, I know you're going to scream when we get home, but really I have to have this book.
But I have to have this book.
Yeah,
but the
so
truth
they were
is,
very happy.
It's a great solution, because no one is going to take your whole contents.
No.
But, if 50 people take away 2 things, that's a whole lot that you don't have to take to the new house. That's great. I'm glad it was successful.
Yeah, and it was an opportunity to see neighbors before I left.
Right.
Because I was moving an hour's drive away. So it was a good way of saying goodbye to people.
Right.
I did something similar when I moved out of a house and into a shared space with a roommate. And the other day, one of the friends who took away a whole bunch of my books in 2007 was here for one of our going away brunches, and she talked with great fondness about the day she came and took away a whole bunch of my books. So when you give your books that way to your book lover friends, you're not only lightening your own load, but you're deepening those relationships, because that's that here she is talking about it
a decade later,
13 years later.
Yeah. That's awesome. Great. Thank you,
Denise. We also have a comment from Petra. Petra said, in our previous home, we shuffled the books at some point. I volunteered for a much smaller bookcase to give my husband more space in the library after getting rid of a bookcase in the guest room. I had to decide on my favorites. Very enlightening. I let go of many books and even more the next year.
Right. And books is just a perfect example of, we collect over our lifetime, our tastes and interests change. Everything can be revisited because your style, your interest, your focus is shifting over time, and there's always things that appeal to you 15 years ago that aren't going to be on your radar now, and it's time to let them go. And we just don't ever go back and circle back. We just keep adding. We don't circle back and subtract. And so downsizing is going to be when you do it, and you can do it with books or you can do it with anything. Absolutely.
We also have a comment from Facebook. Randy said, I'm decluttering to stay in place, but pretending that I'm moving. A couple friends a couple friends downsized last year, and I want to avoid the high angst level when I do.
Right. And every time that, I mean, using moving as your parameters it's a great way to say, even if you're pretending, right? So if you say, if I was moving, would I be willing to put this in a box, pay the movers to take it because I want to use it on the other end? And if the answer is no, then you can let it go before you have to worry about getting to the downsizing point. It's a great mental exercise to just ask yourself, would I put this in a box and pack it and unpack it and pay people to carry it? And if the answer is no, it means it's ready to go out in your car to go to Goodwill or your Whiteelephant area.
Okay, did we get through everything on your list?
Yes, except for the tip of the week. I think we have a tip of the week.
Oh, yeah.
So this is related specifically to downsizing, and we're going to talk about math, the math of downsizing. And I know everybody's going to groan about math, but it's a useful exercise to see how the change in square footage will mean a change to the contents that you're going to store or live with just to stay at an even level of density. So if you imagine that your house is 2,000 square feet, and then you are going to move to a 900 square foot apartment, the math is you're going to lose 1,100 square feet in that scenario, and that's a 55% change in space. So basically more than half. So if you look at your house right now and how dense it is and how much stuff is in all the cabinets and everything, just to stay at that same level of density, when you move from 2,000 to 900 square feet, you have to get rid of 55%. So slightly more than half of the contents have to go for you to stay at the same level of crowdedness, I guess is the way to say that. So if you can do the math, here's my current square footage. I'm going to go to a smaller version. It's that much change. That means my contents have to shrink at least by half. That means that when you're standing in your closet and you look at it and say, okay, so half of the clothes on this clothing rod have to go for me to fit into the new closet at the other end at the same level of crowdedness, right? You can't make a 55% change in space and expect to only get rid of 20% of your clothes and fit. You're just going to be much more crowbarred in when you move, and you're going to end up having to get rid of on the other side. So do that little calculation for yourself so that you can say to yourself, sometimes the change is more drastic. Sometimes people are going from 4,000 square feet to 900 square feet. I mean, you may have to be getting rid of 75% of your stuff. And when Ed left his home in the Heights and he moved in as a roommate to somebody else, he went from owning a house that had several bedrooms and lots of space to he had a bedroom, he was sharing a living room area for his office, and everything else was communal space that he didn't get to put a whole bunch of stuff into. And so he got rid of like 90% of what he owned in order to make that change. And so you have to recognize that if you're going to lose half of your square footage or more than half of your square footage when you downsize, by definition, you're going to have to get rid of at least half of the contents just to stay at the same level of crowded. And if you're trying to downsize and thin the herd and be less crowded, declutter at the same time, then instead of 55%, you might want to aim for 75%. So 3 out of every 4 of the things that you touch needs to go.
And of course, a few things are sort of non-negotiable unless you want lifestyle changes. Like if you have a king-size bed, you need a king-size bed, you're still going to have a king-size bed. So you might end up with a bedroom with nothing else in it to keep that king-size bed.
Depending, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's right. You're making the choices of what is the super most important and recognizing that, half or more than half in my example, and maybe the change you're making isn't as drastic, but if you're trying to combine downsizing and decluttering so that you're not as crowded, you're really going to be giving away 2 out of every 4, 3 out of every 4 things that you touch. And so having that math in your head so that when you're standing there looking at the shoes and going, okay, I'm making this change. I got to get rid of 55% of my shoes. That means I got to get rid of 30 pairs in here. So which 30 is it going to be? I mean, it gives you a parameter to work from and aim for, so that when you're unpacking on the other end, you're not completely jam-packed. And you do the same mental exercise just when two people move in together, for instance. I mean, if you have been living alone and then you move in with somebody in an equal space, or you guys might move together and move someplace new, or somebody moves into your space. So then instead of having 100% of the space, you only have 50% of the space. And so it gives you a parameter in which to say, I want to get rid of 50% of my stuff. One out of every two things I touch has to go. And use that as a way to help you know when you've gotten rid of enough, right? Because we err on the side of caution and we keep a lot more than we need to. And so telling yourself, I have to get rid of one out of every two, lets you know, okay, I'm keeping up with my change in space, basically. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
One more comment I want to share from Bonnie, who is with us in Zoom. I find it interesting that the KonMari movement seems to take the world by storm, but in reality, it doesn't work for all of us. When you've lost your parents and are now empty nesters, there are things that you have emotional attachments to, so you have to work through those items and feelings. For instance, my mom crocheted sweaters and a christening coat for my daughters.
Aww.
I found that I could come to terms with passing on the sweaters and kept the one item, the christening coat. It took several passes to get through those types of items.
Well, that's true. And I think that Marie Kondo is a young woman, of course, with young children. And, you know, I don't know what the status is of her parents. So she may not have had this life experience yet, first of all. And she is also she's from Japan. She's from a small island where they deal with space and think about contents in a very different way, a very non-American way. And so her Eastern philosophy works for some people. And I think as Americans who have had a very abundant lifestyle, we get, you know, some of us have a little trouble adapting to this concept. So I get it that, you know, as we get older, the more stuff we hold, and as our parents age and pass away, then we inherit more. So we just add to the stuff that we've already got. And if we haven't done anything, you know, she's very good about, in her life, she is constantly doing the maintenance that's required. About, you get stuff in, you let things go, it's constantly churning. And if you haven't been doing that churning, and then you inherit stuff from your family who also were not doing that churning, then by definition, you're drowning in a project that is completely overwhelming. And so, yeah, Marie's method might not be the perfect place to start your big depurging process when there's a lot of sediment involved with the stuff. I get it. And, you know, whatever works for anybody. So there may be some parts of how she manages that will work when you get to a maintenance mode, when you get past this scorched earth process you have to do in order to deal with your family's inherited collection and the sentimental work that you have to do about some of that stuff. Don't worry about it. If KonMari isn't your thing, then, you know, just keep keeping at it the way that it works for you.
Bonnie confirmed that she is the Bonnie who made the suggestion of the topic. And
hi, Bonnie.
So thank you for that. We're really grateful for the people who keep coming back, and we get to talk to you a lot of times. Petra added, I do find it gets easier with time though. Almost all my siblings are revisiting items they took from our parents' home and letting go of stuff they couldn't let go of before.
And that's, you know, you always have to remember that when you're dealing with your parents and the grief of your parents' loss, it's like the worst time of your life, which means that you have no emotional resources to deal with decision making. It's so hard to make decisions in that moment because you're so overwhelmed with grief, and a whole lot of your mental and emotional resources are being used to help you process that new normal and deal with that loss. And so it makes perfect sense that what you picked in stage one and right after your parents died is not going to be what you keep later. And if you have to do it in stages where you keep a little bit more and then you thin it over time and eventually you can let go of more, that's great. Don't give yourself a hard time about not being able to make all those decisions right after the funeral, because it's super, super hard. I had that whole experience too, and you just have to give yourself the space to grieve. And if you can let go of it later, awesome.
One more comment.
Okay.
Petra added, it's much easier now to let go of those things I inherited from my parents. Letting some time, oh, I'm sorry, that was actually Bonnie. Letting some time go by before making a difficult choice, and not letting it, we talk about that a lot, not letting the difficult choice derail you. You can be willing to set something aside and say, this is too much for me to handle right now.
Yeah.
You just can't, you can't let everything go in that category.
Right. Yeah. You can't say it's all too difficult. There's always something in your house that you do not have an emotional investment about. And so if you're struggling with stuff, then, go stand in front of the linen closet and throw away the towels. I mean, whatever is easy for you to do. Maybe it's a more intellectual instead of emotional exercise to go and deal with old files with old papers in them or something like that. There's always a topic somewhere in the house. There's always a category in the house that doesn't distress you as much as the sentimental things that are bothering you. And so, when you get stuck, go find one that isn't derailing for you and work on that for a while and have sort of a mental break. And then you can go back and try the sentimental stuff again.
Petra added, I'm getting it right this time. This one's Petra. Sorry, the chat has been very lively. I'm losing track today. I do like the idea of things sparking joy. That's the only thing I took from it. Choose positively, not focusing on the items you discard.
And focusing on the joy is really, it's the sort of her Eastern philosophy way of saying, does this make me happy? Do I like this when I see it? Does it make me feel uncomfortable? Sometimes people keep things that make them sad or remind them of something. This is left over from my divorce. This is left over from the job that I lost, and it's in the house and it's making them sad. And so, remember the person that said that there was a bookcase in the hallway that they hated, and they were saving it for their son. You remember that lady? And it was like every time she walked by this bookcase in the house, it made her angry. It's like, then why is it in the house? Well, I'm saving it for my son for when he gets a house. Okay, so how old is he and where is he living? Well, he's 40 and he's renting a room in his friend's house. Like, yeah, that bookcase is not leaving the house anytime soon. And, you can let go of that bookcase. And if he ever gets a house, you can go buy him a new one. This basically was the advice that I gave. I mean, it's great to focus on, I want the things in the house that make me feel relaxed, supported, comfortable, happy. This is the place where you rejuvenate, and you want to save those things that make you happy. And so that was, Marie Kondo's version of that is, does it spark joy? That's the question she's asking. Does it make you happy and smile when you look at it? And if it does, it's worthy of a place. And if it doesn't, then you have to ask yourself why it's taking up some of your space. It's just her version of saying that, and I love it. I mean, it's perfect to remind yourself, I don't have to live with things that make me angry every time I walk by them. Right?
Definitely. Okay, just a couple more things, then we need to wrap it up.
We're out of time almost, yeah.
Karen on Facebook added, when my mom passed away, we didn't realize we donated the suit she was married in. So have the conversations with your parents now so you know what may be important.
Exactly. And this is something that's hard for people because, you don't want to acknowledge that your parents are aging and they're going to leave you someday. Nobody wants to face that. It's the hardest thing ever. And no person wants to be in when they're physically, you don't want to be having those conversations when somebody is really physically impaired, is ill, is, you know, they're dying, and you can't have a bunch of conversations, then it's too late. This is all stuff that you have to do, not in one sitting. We talked about this last week, not in one sitting, and you need to be asking those questions and having those conversations while everybody is calm and healthy and, you know, happy to be in each other's company, and telling stories when everybody is relaxed. And so better that you do it now, and just as an adult, you know that these things are going to be remembered later, because you remember things that your elders, your parents, and other grown-ups in your life told you when you were a younger person, and it's time for you to share those stories down the line so that they will remember them when you're gone. And it's something you have to do while everybody is relaxing in a good place. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, there's so many more comments. We're not going to get to them all today, I'm afraid. So
I'll go back and read them, I promise.
yeah, and we'll talk about some of them next time, I think. Our next webcast / podcast will be on Tuesday, February 4th at noon Central Time, live in Zoom and streaming on Facebook. So if you're watching this on YouTube, we'd love for you to join us live to receive notifications about upcoming events. We invite you to join the meetup group by visiting cfhou.com/meetup.
Right.
You can also follow us on Facebook by going to cfhou.com/Facebook, or subscribe to our mailing list by visiting cfhou.com/subscribe.
Yay.
We'd love to hear from you. Please send us your questions and topic suggestions in the YouTube comments, on the Facebook feed, and through our email at podcast.clutterfairyhouston.com. And you can always reach us through our website at clutterfairyhouston.com.
Right. We are so grateful that you guys are sending us questions and comments, and we love reading them, and it's doing a great job of sparking conversation, so that we know that we're answering the questions that you have in the moment. And so thank you for coming and joining us today. We really appreciate it, and we will see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.